it feels like the latest iPhone release for a number of reasons, right? I'm not trying to underplay how amazing this is. All I'm trying to say is for the vast majority of people, for everyday use cases and for everyday users, it's going to feel virtually the same as all the other GPT-5 models, right? So let's talk about why it feels a little underwhelming. And let's do that by first talking about how incredible GPT-4 was, or the times that we've lived during GPT-4 have been, right? GPT-4, during the time, and we've lived with GPT-4 for a very long time. GPT-4 was released in 2023, so it's been a really long time. In the time of GPT-4, we saw the advent of the mixture of experts architecture. And that was pretty amazing because one of the ways these AI models get better is you simply make them bigger. You give them more parameters, you give them more memory, you just make these models bigger. GPT-4 was 1.7, GPT-4o was 1.7 trillion parameters. That's a colossal model. That's like every time you ask it to do an inference, you're trying to navigate a gigantic tanker. It's a huge model. But the mixture of experts architecture made it so that there were separate sections of this neural network that would get activated depending on the kind of expertise that was needed. That made inference very efficient and, especially for larger models. If you're trying to do a coding task, only the section of the AI model that was responsible or that was an expert for coding would light up, would get activated. We saw the advent of the chain of thought reasoning model approach, which basically took a really complicated task and broke it down into a series of steps so that the AI model could execute on the task step by step. This pretty much laid the groundwork for agentic use cases. And if you've been anywhere near anybody that's invested in AI, they're foaming at the mouth talking about how agents are the next big thing. Clearly, a very much of a breakthrough, right? It also lets you one-shot really complicated tasks by breaking it down into a lot of steps. If you're a fan of Studio Ghibli, then you will remember how Studio Ghibli basically took over the internet when GPT-4 released their unified model for multimodal content generation, right? They had one model, a unified model, that handled text, images, and audio instead of having an image model kind of patched together with their text generation model. And that simple change by the unified model led to much higher quality, much better fidelity images. You could finally have faithful text, non-garbage looking text show up on these images. You could describe images and they would much faithfully be generated. All of this happened during the era of GPT-4. Now, I'm not going to do GPT-5 injustice, right? It absolutely crushes all the benchmarks, right? It's better at math, it's better at coding, it's better at PhD level questions, it's better at solving hard healthcare problems. It is better even at the AGI focused benchmarks. It performed better on humanity's last exam with and without tool use than any other model before. It is clearly a very, very competent model. But the question is, do you really care? How does that change the way you were conducting your business? How does that change how you were interacting with AI or using AI models? It's clearly a very capable model, but it makes a significant incremental development on all of its previous capabilities without presenting you with a major breakthrough. I think the key thing that it's going to be better at is pretty much going to be coding. And if you watch the 1+ hour release video for GPT-5, this is the one thing that they foam at the mouth trying to convince you of. And they don't have to do much of a convincing. They don't have to do too much convincing because it's true. It's much better at coding. The CEO of Cursor said as much. This is the best coding model that they've ever worked with. And here's the secret to why it is such an incredible coding model, right? It is able to give you a much better context window than ever before. If you're just going back to how things started, GPT-3, which was like the first sort of, oh wow, this thing can think for itself model, had a context window of 4,000 tokens. We are now 2 orders of magnitude greater officially with our context window for GPT-5, which gives you a context window of 400,000 tokens. And if you give it a much bigger context window, naturally, 2 things are going to happen. Number one, your model is going to be able to handle more and more complicated things more consistently because, number one, it's going to be able to handle larger and larger asks. And number 2, it's going to be able to handle them more consistently because it's going to be able to take into account a lot of the requirements and constraints all into the context of that single prompt. So unsurprisingly, GPT-5 is really good at one-shotting very, very complicated coding projects. But here's the thing. Everyday users are not trying to use AI models to come up with really complicated projects. Even your software engineer power users these days are maybe writing up very simple dashboards or vibe coding, like fitness tracker, meal planning apps. These are very simple apps to code up. Unless you're trying to put together a very complex backend with distributed systems and a very clear strategy to scaling, that you want to bake into the architecture, you're not really going to see the differences in terms of how GPT-5 is better than your previous AI models. Unless you're really pushing this model to extreme use cases, you're not really going to be able to see the benefits of having a really large context window. You're not going to really be able to see the benefits of having these model being able to do dual use in parallel much better than other models before it were able to do. So for the everyday user and for everyday use cases, GPT-5 isn't really magical. But if you're really trying to push it to the extreme, GPT-5 is going to definitely surprise you. So kudos. But, it doesn't feel magical. It definitely doesn't feel magical, which is okay. Now, if you want to talk about something truly magical, I think you should turn your attention to something that didn't get as much press, in my opinion, as it should have, as much press as it deserved. And that is the research preview model that came out of DeepMind for its world-building AI agent. I'm sure you've come across videos, it definitely needs to be talked about more, because this feels like a breakthrough, right? GPT-5, I'm sorry to say, doesn't feel like a breakthrough. It feels like your newest iPhone release, right? In much the same way as you can't really tell the difference, the everyday person, unless you're an expert on camera aperture and, other camera-related things. I'm not a camera expert, don't quiz me on this, but unless you're really a person that is super invested in camera equipment, you're not really going to be able to tell the difference between how good last year's iPhone camera was versus this year's iPhone camera, unless you really push that camera to the extreme, in extremely low light conditions, in very unstable modes of capturing photography. You're not really going to be able to see how much better that camera was. GPT-5 in a lot of ways is much the same. If you really want to appreciate how much progress we've made with the iPhone, I invite you to go find an iPhone 3 or something and try to browse the internet on it. It's going to feel like you're scratching a piece of bar soap trying to, see these web pages come up. It's going to feel terrible, and then you're going to realize how much better off we are with the latest models of iPhones. Anyway, let's talk about Google's Genie 3. This isn't a video generation model, right? If you've seen the previews and if you haven't paid attention, you're going to feel like, oh yeah, so it creates this immersive video generation content. It generates video in a very immersive way. That is not it. It creates a world for you, and you're able to dive into this world and interact with objects in this world in a way that respects the physics of this world. If this doesn't yell, we are marching headfirst into creating a simulation and then living in that simulation, or maybe that's the number one clue that maybe we've already done this and we're already living in such a simulation. I don't know what screams that more. So talking a bit more about the Genie 3 model, it learned some things in a recursive self-improvement powered way, in the sense that some of the abilities that this model has are emergent abilities. When I say emergent, what I mean is the model basically figured out how to do it. As the model grew bigger and bigger, it figured out how to be consistent with actions you take within this realm, right? So if you've seen the demo of a person sort of creating a house with a bunch of walls and taking like a paint roller, rolling some shapes onto the wall, looking away and looking back in this video, in this world, 3D world that's been generated by Genie 3, as you turn away from the wall and turn back to the wall, you're going to see all of the same paintings just stay on the wall. It is able to be consistent with events that has happened within this world. The world remembers the mark you've left on it. And sure, like right now, it can only sustain the simulation for the matter of a few seconds, for some tens of seconds, and you can't really expect text to stay consistent over time. But I am sure as we throw more compute power at it, more compute resources and memory at it, we can very easily see how this could create a simulation that you could live in, right? And until now, at least for this version of the research preview, intelligent actors cannot act with other intelligent actors. So it really feels like a dream. You can't speak to other intelligent actors within this 3D world. But hey, I don't see that being a limitation, right? That could very easily change. This feels like a breakthrough. And obviously, if you market this the wrong way, this is going to be very scary to people. Imagine if Reality Labs, imagine if Meta came up with this when they were full-throated, diving headfirst into, hey, the metaverse is going to be the next new thing. Imagine if Meta came up with this when they switched gears and were like, yep, the metaverse is the next big thing we're pouring everything into. People would be convinced. They're like, hey, if you can set up worlds that are interactive, even if it's like a 20-second demo world right now, take my money, man. This is where we're going to be living in the next decade, whether we like it or not. But the way Google's been marketing this is Genie 3 is really creating worlds for training purposes. It wants to give you a simulation of an environment that's going to be dangerous so that you can maybe learn to operate in an environment, say maybe firefighting exercises or disaster relief efforts when you have to go into a terrain where there's a lot of dangers and a lot of potholes and maybe like falling debris and stuff. It is also, as Google's DeepMind touts, it's a way for it's a way for robots to get a lot of simulated training with these simulated environments, because these environments respect physics, and if robots are able to interact faithfully with this 3D environment, they are going to be able to have similar interactions in the real world in a much cheaper and time-efficient way. So yeah, verdict all in all, GPT-5 is going to be able to do some pretty amazing things, but it's only going to be doing those amazing things for power users that push it to its limits. For the vast majority of everyday users, this, I don't think this is something that most people are going to get excited about. As for Genie 3, my friend, if we don't already live in a simulation, we are heading straight first into one. On that note, thank you for watching.